Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, we'll be talking about JMP versus spreadsheets. When do we use JMP? When do we use spreadsheets? What are the differences between these two programs? And why do we use JMP for some things that we could do in Excel or Sheets, but we choose to use JMP for? So our main difference here is we really want to distinguish what is a spreadsheet program or software versus what is JMP. So what are those differences in terms of how do they approach data? How do you store data in them? What does data mean? Versus what are just the general pros and cons of these programs in terms of our workflows? So to start off with, data structure refers to how can you input data, where can you put it, and how does it relate to other data near it? So in spreadsheets, data is loosely structured. Every single cell is independent. You can put data in any cell you want, and you can refer to any other cell you want, which means you can make anything anywhere. Sounds nice. Is it? We'll find out. JMP, on the other hand, has very strict data structures. Cells are not independent. They depend on the row and the column that they're in. Columns are almighty in JMP. So a column defines the type of information contained in it. Rows are linked across columns, and formula in JMP, rather than referencing cells, reference entire columns. And if you have multiple columns in there, let's say you divide column A by column B, it goes through row by row. So it'll divide the first row in column A by the first row in column B. So let's look at that in Sheets and JMPs. So in JMP, we have our leaf data from earlier. If we look at, say, this species column and double click it, we can look at the properties for this column. So the column properties apply to all of the data within that column. We can pick the data type, which JMP is fairly good at guessing, the modeling type. We can define other properties on here. We could make a formula column if we want. Same thing for leaf length. Now in Sheets, we can put this data anywhere, any way we want. And this ties back to our earlier idea of tidy data. So in JMP, our data has to be tidy. We have one line of data per row. Sheets, we have a little more flexibility. We don't have to have tidy data. We should because it makes our life easier, and we'll show that. But we can put it in any way we want. So maybe this is how we recorded our data over here. And at the bottom here, I calculated an average by just typing equal average and running it for that whole column. And maybe I do the same thing for standard deviation. Note, I use stdev.s, which is the standard deviation of a sample. Alternatively, I could store my data in this tidy format. The tidy format's nice because at the bottom here, I can just add in more data as I go, and I can calculate averages from that. Now, how I calculate averages changes. And this is also an important distinction between tidy and untidy data. In untidy data, I can keep adding rows down here, and I could feasibly set up a summary somewhere, either at the bottom or even at the top, and make it kind of easy to update this. For tidy data, though, we specifically say every column has a definition and only data under it, which means we can't put summary data underneath tidy data. We can't use this space here because if I put like an average here, that's not part of this column, that's its own separate thing. So with tidy data, you tend to have summaries isolated from your data columns. And I also want to show another advantage of tidy data. So here, this is kind of, if you're a new user to Excel and you learn how to make averages and use cells and functions, and you're like, I know how to calculate the average of alloncinium. I'm just going to sort my column by alloncinium and average these all together. That's okay, but if you want to add more data down here and you add alloncinium, that's not going to get captured by this formula. If you have a tidy data structure, though, you can use average if. And you can say, scan through column G, anywhere you see the word alloncinium, take its average from column H. And you can apply that to all of these. So tidy data structures, Sheets, and Excel have many formulas built in that assume you have a tidy data structure. Now, let's go back pros and cons. So Sheets, pros and cons, live collaboration. You have all that Google power at your fingertips. You can just share someone a hyperlink and they can get on and start working with you. Jump's not so good at that. Excel can be if you have Microsoft Teams. I think there's still limitations on what you can do in it through Teams, but it's pretty good. Flexibility of Sheets, again, you can put data in however you want. If your workflow combines tidy data and sumarial data, it's really convenient to have that in a sheet because it'll auto update. You can share it. You can train others how to use it. Multiple people can add to it. You can choose where things pop up and how visuals appear with a lot more flexibility than you can in, say, Jump. Now, unfortunately, this flexibility leads to a lot of problems. So, poor data management, this untidy data thing, makes downstream processes a lot harder, and we'll look at that with graphs. The flexibility also makes stats harder to run correctly. We looked a little bit at this with the average functions just now, but if you say try to run a t-test, it's much easier to run the t-test or Tukey's test on tidy data than on untidy data because the tests aren't meant to use untidy data. More so, if you try to run the test on untidy data and you aren't very careful in how you do it and set it up, you'll get out the wrong result. So there's a lot of ability in Sheets, even if you're using statistics plugins, to think you're running the test correctly but get the wrong result. If we compare that to, say, Jump, the rigid data structuring in Jump means it's annoying to get your data in there correctly if you're new to it, but Jump won't let you run the wrong test with the wrong data set. It will give you a lot of errors, or the result you get will be very obvious nonsense, which can be a little hard to identify if you're new to statistics or Jump. But if you get a statistics result and your n is 1, which Jump will say, you should be suspicious that you did something uh, incorrectly. And lastly, graphing options in Sheets are a little more limited than in Jump. Graph Builder in Jump is a very powerful tool. It lets us make graphs that capture a lot of information and kind of show it how we want to see it. Whereas getting to that same graph in Sheets requires jumping through a lot more hoops, even to the point that you might have to go into VBA and write some code to do it. And then if we go back to Jump, the main con of Jump, besides the lack of live collaboration, is the data structuring is just challenging for new unit users. So if you've not worked with tidy data before, if the idea of these sheets, which are basically CSV style files, comma separated variables, uh, is new or alien or uncomfortable to you, then this is where the struggle to using Jump comes in. So I want to show some quick examples of really the benefits of even using tidy data styles in Sheets. Like in Jump, if I want to make a graph from tidy data, it's really simple. Species, leaf length, bar graph, standard deviation. Okay, we're done. We made that graph, easy peasy. If I'm making this for lab or for a publication or something, I might put the dots on there and then play with the formatting options. Maybe I want this to be medium gray and I want this to be light gray. I want to edit my standard deviation. We'll make it black. We'll make it fat. And then I want it on top. Bam, done. And then I'll get rid of my legend. So footer title 2. All right, we have a graph ready for export. We can send that wherever we want. If we want to do the statistic on it, we can just do the analyze fit y by x, x response. And then in this case, this will be a Tukey, so we'll do the all pair Tukey HSD, and we see our significance down there. So all in all, that took, 30 seconds in Jump. Now let's do the same thing with our sheets in untidy and tidy formats. So tidy, I'm gonna wing this one a little bit since I don't work with tidy data. We want to insert a chart. Um, and it's already confused. Let's see. I want this to also be a series. This is where I think it's going to be rough. Add Jordanicus in, and then stacking. I don't think I want stacking. Oh, that's interesting, but no. So I do think this is about as far as we're going to get here. Now, that's me trying to work with the raw data. What's more common is people will make the graph out of the summary data down here, and this one will make sense. So let's see, we'll do that. We'll add in B again, and then we just have to get labels on these. But we'll leave that down there. So, we've made our graph. It's a little sad. We can probably add in the um, error bars. So we add error bars. I'm going to tell it I want a um, constant error bar. Unfortunately, I would have to do this manually for each of them. So this gets very painful very quickly, as you can see. I have to manually do a lot to get the shape of graph that I want. So like I think 3 here is probably Alencinium, so I'd have to type in the 0.919 error bar on that, and I would have to do that for each of my error bars. Obviously is time consuming. I think there's a way I can define what this series is called too. Or if I put these titles down here again and reference them, it'll go better. Uh, I don't know which of these is which. Not like the, oh, because I'm not set to constant. There we go. I'll do this last one. But what is the point of doing all of this if I have to manually input these anyways? Let's see, what do I think that is? Yep, okay, so I can manually label all of these. Let's see, this one I think this is actually backwards, I think this first one is Preceptoria. But I can continue on, whatever. Now let's try it with our tidy data. If I take this, insert chart, um, let's see, we have leaf length, we have species, and then we set it to aggregate. Is it? Oh, and set to histogram. I want a bar chart. Chart. There we go. Now we do aggregate. I did not need to put species in there as part of this column. So we're just going to tell it G2. G22. We'll just try again. But as you can kind of see from what's already happening here is that this is coming out much more well behaved. And then I can add our error bars somewhere here. And I can tell it to use the standard deviation. I don't know why it's being so weird about them. Should be able to calculate these. There we go. No, still being weird about that. So again, I know there's a way to make this behave better, but not doing a great example here. This should be behaving though. Anyways, highly encourage using Jump to make your graphs. You can go through and manually make the same graph in Excel, but it's just much more painful. Oh, I see. This is doing the sum and not the average. Is it not? Okay, so it did re-average there. The right error bars. Wonder if this is the grand mean and it's not splitting the error bar out by the type. Well, anyways, that's all, folks. Again, highly encourage using. Well, I have one other point of discussion, which is where do I use jump versus sheets? I like doing math manipulations in sheets. Um, I typically have, say, some kind of reference sheet in here with values that I cross-reference, and I'll use my VLOOKUP function or index match to pull those in and do calculations with them. I find it easier to set up advanced or conditional calculations in Sheets than in Jump. You can do a lot with the columns in Jump, but just with my training, I'm used to doing that in Sheets. Uh, I am very rigid though. I do use tidy data in all of my sheets because I know I'm going to import them into Jump later. And if I do it clean in Sheets, I can just copy paste into Jump and I'm good to go. If I am lazy in Sheets, it makes it much harder to use it in Jump. Now, I will note that I typically know what I'm doing in Sheets and how to restructure things once I get into Jump using the tables function. So there's a chance I might not be super tidy in a lazy quick personal document, but 95% of the time even then I'm using tidy data structures. So I hope this helps. I hope it kind of clears the air a little bit on why we do things the way we do. And let's see this one. I hope that now you can kind of distinguish a little bit between spreadsheets and jump, particularly these data structures. We will be using a mix of both in our course. And if you have any questions or you're struggling with anything, I am more than happy to answer questions. And I will see you in the next video.